HOA forced me to remove my dam, over $400 in fees. They didn't know it held back the whole river. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional, and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. You really want your name on that order? I asked, holding the clipboard steady while the first steel bolt clattered onto the concrete below us. Diane Whitlock looked at me over the top of her sunglasses, her smile sharp and polished, the kind real estate agents use right before they tell you a cracked foundation has character. Behind her, a yellow excavator idled on the crest of my dam, coughing diesel into the cool Virginia morning. Hydraulic fluid and wet stone hung in the air. 20 feet below, the Mercer River pressed against the gate with a low metallic hum I had known since childhood. Diane tapped one manicured fingernail against the signature line. It's $400, Caleb. You could have avoided all this by paying your community fees. The wind lifted the corner of the removal order. I could see the HOA letterhead, the county stamp they had obtained under false pretenses, and the sentence claiming my flood control gate was an unauthorized decorative obstruction. Decorative. That gate weighed nearly 3 tons. It controlled a watershed stretching 11 miles north into the Blue Ridge foothills. But Diane saw an old piece of steel blocking the lakefront view she had promised to a developer. I handed her the pen. Sign where it says you received my written warning. Her expression tightened for half a second. Then she laughed. You've been warning everyone for 3 weeks. The river, the rain, the end of civilization. We understand. No, I said. You don't. The excavator operator glanced toward us, suddenly less comfortable. Behind him, 2 contractors were loosening the final retaining bracket. Each turn of their impact wrench cracked across the valley. Diane signed with a looping blue flourish and shoved the clipboard against my chest. There. Now open the control room. I looked past her at the water. The surface seemed calm, dark and glassy beneath the morning fog, but the pressure gauge beside the spillway had climbed 6 pounds since dawn. Upstream, rain had fallen all night across 40 square miles of mountain. That water had not reached us yet. It would. My father taught me to read a river before I was tall enough to reach the valve wheel. Birds leaving the shoreline. Muddy foam gathering near the intake. A faint vibration in the gate that traveled through your boots and settled behind your ribs. All 3 signs were there. I pulled the old brass key from my jacket pocket. Its teeth were worn smooth from 37 years of use. Diane watched it turn in the lock and smiled like she had won. The control room door groaned open, releasing the smell of cold iron, machine oil, and damp concrete. Inside, the red warning line on the pressure board sat only 2 inches above the needle. I checked my watch. 6:43 a.m. The main surge from the mountains would arrive in less than an hour. Diane stepped inside and pointed toward the valve controls. Once the gate is gone, we can finally restore this area to its natural condition. I almost corrected her. Then the final bolt dropped outside with a heavy clang, and the entire steel gate shuddered against the river. Diane's smile vanished. What was that? I closed my hand around the brass key. That, I said, was the part holding back the whole river. 3 weeks earlier, the trouble had arrived in a cream-colored envelope that smelled faintly of printer toner and expensive perfume. I found it wedged beneath the brass knocker on my front door after spending the morning clearing branches from the eastern spillway. The paper was thick, the lettering embossed, and the amount printed near the bottom was almost laughable, $400. According to Diane Whitlock, I owed Riverstone Heights a special landscape compliance fee for maintaining an unapproved water feature beside the community boundary. She had circled the words unapproved water feature in blue ink, as if my family had installed a decorative fountain instead of operating a flood control structure older than half the houses in her subdivision. I drove to the HOA office that afternoon with the notice folded inside my jacket. Riverstone Heights occupied a renovated farmhouse near the subdivision entrance, complete with white columns, polished brass numbers, and flower beds arranged so precisely they looked measured with a ruler. Diane sat behind a glass desk wearing a pale blue blazer and the same calm smile she used whenever she expected obedience. I placed the notice in front of her. My property is not part of Riverstone Heights. She folded her hands. Your reservoir borders our common area. The river borders your common area. The dam is on my land. The board adopted an expanded watershed maintenance policy last month. She slid a laminated map across the desk. Someone had colored my reservoir blue and labeled it Community Scenic Basin. The line ran straight through my property boundary, across the spillway, and around the control house. I stared at it long enough to hear the wall clock ticking behind her. Who drew this? I asked. Our planning consultant. Your consultant moved the county property line by almost 900 feet. Her smile never changed. Maps evolve, Caleb. Communities evolve. That was when I understood the fee was not about money. $400 was small enough to seem harmless, but the attached enforcement clause was not. If I failed to pay within 30 days, the HOA claimed the right to enter the property, correct the violation, and bill me for the work. They were creating a paper trail that would let them reach the dam without admitting that was their goal. I pulled the original survey from my truck and spread it across her desk. The paper smelled like dust and old ink. My father's signature sat at the bottom beside the county seal. Diane barely glanced at it. That document is from 1987. Property lines do not expire because you're bored. Finds them inconvenient. Her fingers tightened around a silver pen. You are making this more difficult than it needs to be. No. I am making it accurate. 2 days later, orange survey stakes appeared along the western shore. They marked a 6-foot drop in the reservoir level and a proposed walking path where water still stood 20 feet deep. Beyond them, I found a new sign half hidden behind a cedar tree, Future Riverstone Waterfront Commons. The wood was freshly painted. The ground smelled of wet clay where someone had already tested the soil. I stood there listening to the steady rush through the spillway and realized Diane did not want $400. She wanted the water lowered, the shoreline exposed, and my dam under her control. The orange survey stakes were still dripping from the morning rain when Diane turned them into a campaign. By noon, every mailbox in Riverstone Heights held a glossy flyer with a photograph of my dam under the words "Dangerous obstruction threatens community safety." The picture had been taken from an angle that hid the reinforced spillway, the county inspection plate, and the warning signs. It made the structure look abandoned. By evening, Diane had scheduled an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. I attended because silence would have been mistaken for surrender. The room smelled of coffee, floor wax, and wet coats. Nearly 60 residents sat in folding chairs while Diane stood beneath a projector screen beside a man named Curtis Vale, who introduced himself as an environmental planning consultant. His business card said landscape design. It did not mention hydraulic engineering, dam safety, or flood management. Curtis displayed a rendering of the reservoir with the water lowered 6 feet. In the image, the newly exposed shoreline held walking trails, picnic tables, and a row of decorative lights. Diane called it a restoration plan. I called it what it was. That land is below the normal operating level, I said. It floods by design. Diane rested both hands on the podium. Mr. Mercer has repeatedly resisted reasonable community improvements. Because your improvements are sitting inside a flood pool. Curtis. Click to the next slide. A red circle appeared around my control gate. Our preliminary assessment indicates this outdated mechanism unnecessarily restricts the river's natural flow. I looked around the room. Several residents nodded because the word sounded official. What is your professional license number? I asked. Curtis paused. The projector fan hummed behind him. I work with a multidisciplinary team. Are you licensed to evaluate dams in Virginia? Diane stepped in before he could answer. This is not a courtroom. No, I said. It is a room full of people whose homes depend on a gate he does not understand. The air changed after that. Diane's smile became thinner. She announced that the board had voted to classify the dam as a nuisance structure and would pursue administrative removal if I did not pay the fee and lower the reservoir. I placed a sealed packet on the table in front of her. Inside were current inspection records, rainfall models, downstream maps, and a written warning explaining what could happen if the gate was altered before storm season. Sign the receipt, I said. It confirms you were given the safety documents. She signed without reading them. That sound, the scratch of her pen across paper, was quieter than the rain against the clubhouse windows, but I remembered it. 3 days later, the county issued a temporary access order based on Diane's claim that my gate was a decorative barrier blocking a public waterway. The order gave the HOA permission to inspect and correct the supposed obstruction. It was built on false language, but it carried a real stamp. When I returned to the reservoir that afternoon, fresh tire tracks crossed my pasture. Near the western bank, the orange stakes had multiplied. They now formed the outline of 6 waterfront lots. I pulled one from the mud and found a developer's name printed near the base, Whitlock Residential Partners. Diane had not been protecting Riverstone Heights. She had been preparing to sell the riverbed. I took the survey stake to the county records office the next morning. The building sat behind the courthouse, a low brick structure with narrow windows and an air conditioning system that rattled like loose bolts in a toolbox. Inside, the smell of dust, paper, and old carpet hit me before the clerk looked up from her desk. I asked for every flood control map, subdivision approval, and water management agreement tied to the Mercer property and Riverstone Heights. She returned with 3 grey archive boxes and a warning that some of the records had not been opened in decades. That was where I met Owen Price. He was 71, retired from the county engineering department, with silver hair, thick glasses, and hands that still carried the dark stains of a man who had spent his life around machinery. He recognized my last name before I introduced myself. Walter Mercer's boy, he said. I helped your father certify that dam after the 1986 flood. We worked at a long table beneath a flickering fluorescent light. Every page made a dry whisper as we turned it. Owen found the original operating agreement first. The county had never owned the dam, but its bridge permit, wastewater station, and downstream zoning approvals all depended on the dam remaining functional. My family maintained it. The county inspected it. The entire valley benefited from it. Then Owen unfolded a floodplain map so large it covered most of the table. A deep crease ran through the center. When he flattened it, a faded note appeared beneath the fold. Downstream residential development approved only while Mercer flood control structure remains operational. I read it twice. Riverstone Heights had been built because my dam reduced the projected flood elevation by nearly 7 feet. Without the gate controlling peak runoff, 1/3 of the subdivision returned to the river's natural overflow corridor. The clubhouse, the new access road, and all 6 lots marked by Diane's orange stake sat inside that zone. Owen traced the contour line with one finger. They remove your control gate before a major storm. This water will not stop at their walking trail. I showed him the temporary access order. His jaw tightened when he read the phrase decorative barrier. No county hydraulic engineer wrote this. He pulled the approval file for Riverstone Heights. The newest flood map. Inside looked almost identical to the old one, except someone had removed the note about my dam and shifted the blue flood boundary toward the river. The revision had been submitted 6 months earlier by Whitlock Residential Partners. Attached to it was a consulting report warning that lowering the reservoir could increase downstream flow during heavy rainfall. Diane's signature appeared on the receipt page. She had known. She had read the same warning she later claimed I invented. I photographed every page and called Nora Bennett, a water rights attorney whose office was 2 blocks away. By sunset, she had confirmed that Diane's access order was based on incomplete and misleading information. We could challenge it, but the hearing date was 10 days away. The removal crew was scheduled for Friday. Outside the records office, thunder rolled beyond the mountains. The air smelled metallic, and the first cold drop spotted the map tube under my arm. Owen looked toward the dark ridge. "How much water is up there?" he asked. I watched the clouds settle over the watershed. "Enough," I said, "to make every missing line on that map matter." Nora did not waste time telling me to stay calm. She spread the copied records across my kitchen table, pushed her sleeves above her wrists, and started building a wall of paper between Diane and the river. Rain tapped against the windows while my coffee cooled beside the old brass key. The county hearing was still 10 days away, but the removal crew was coming Friday morning. That gave us 48 hours. Nora sent certified warnings to the HOA board, the county administrator, the state dam safety office, the sheriff, and every contractor listed on the access order. Each letter included the original flood agreement, the altered map, and a plain statement that changing the gate could increase downstream water levels. I delivered Diane's copy myself. She opened the door of the HOA office, saw the envelope, and sighed as though I had brought her junk mail. "Another warning?" she asked. "A final one. The order has already been approved." "Then sign that you received this." She signed the delivery receipt without opening the packet. I watched the blue ink dry beneath her name. Back at the dam, Owen helped me install 3 independent water sensors. One sat near the upstream intake. One measured the spillway channel. The third watched the lower river beside the county bridge. I mounted weatherproof cameras on the control house, the western shoreline, and the access road. Every device transmitted to my phone and to a secure county server Nora had arranged through an emergency preservation request. Nothing could disappear if Diane decided the truth was inconvenient. My younger sister Rachel arrived after her shift at the hospital and found me running cable through the control room. Her navy scrub still carried the clean scent of disinfectant. She looked at the pressure chart, then at the rain outside. "Why not just pay the $400 and fight them later?" she asked. "Because payment makes their authority look legitimate. And letting them touch the gate is safe." "No." I pointed to the emergency channel on the south side of the dam. My father had built it after the 1986 flood, a narrow concrete bypass hidden beneath weeds and cedar branches. It had never been used under full pressure. If the main gate failed, I could open that channel manually and redirect enough water to keep the homes above the projected flood line. It would protect the subdivision, but the undeveloped western flats would go underwater. Those were the same flats Diane had marked for her waterfront lots. Rachel studied my face. "You planned for this." "I planned to keep people safe." That distinction mattered. I was not going to create a disaster to prove a point. I was going to document every warning, prepare every safeguard, and let Diane's own decision expose the lie beneath her project. Thursday night, the weather service moved the storm arrival from late Friday to early morning. Rainfall estimates climbed from 2 inches to more than 4 across the mountain watershed. I checked the reservoir at midnight. The water had risen 14 inches. Muddy foam circled the intake. The steel gate hummed beneath my hand. Inside the control room, I set 3 clocks to the correct time, then looked at my father's old pressure clock. It remained 2 minutes slow. At 5:18 Friday morning, my phone lit up with the first sensor alert. At 5:24, headlights appeared on the access road. Diane had brought the crew early. The headlights stopped at the top of the access road, and 6 vehicles rolled through the rain one after another. Diane stepped out first in a white raincoat, holding the temporary order inside a clear plastic sleeve. 2 contractors unloaded tools beside the excavator. A county deputy arrived behind them, not to approve the work, he explained, but to prevent a dispute. I handed him copies of every warning Nora had filed. He read the first page, looked toward the reservoir, and called his supervisor. Diane watched him with growing impatience. "The order is valid," she said. We are only removing an unauthorized obstruction. The upstream sensor vibrated in my pocket. Water level rising. I checked the time. 5:41 in the morning. The mountain surge was moving faster than the weather model predicted. I showed the contractor the pressure chart and told him the gate was under active load. He hesitated, but Diane held up the order. You were hired to complete a job. The man asked her to sign an additional work authorization acknowledging the conditions. She signed it on the hood of her sport utility vehicle without reading more than the first line. Rain drummed against the metal roof of the control house. The river had lost its steady hum. Now it sounded deeper, rougher, like wind moving through a freight tunnel. The crew began loosening the retaining brackets. Each impact from the wrench echoed across the water. I stood beside the deputy and documented every step. At 6:12, Diane ordered the excavator operator to lift the steel gate from its track. The machine strained. Hydraulic lines hissed. Muddy water pressed through the widening gap in a hard, fast sheet. At first, Diane smiled. She told a local reporter that the river was finally being restored. Then the upstream alarm changed from a single pulse to a continuous tone. I looked at the spillway gauge. The needle crossed the red line. Stop the lift, I said. The contractor reached for his radio, but Diane raised her voice over the rain. Continue. The gate rose another foot. The flow doubled. Water rolled through the channel carrying branches, foam, and red mountain clay. The lower bridge sensor sent its first warning. The surge would reach the county road in 17 minutes. I turned to the deputy. Call emergency management now. Close the low road and move everyone away from the western flats. His expression changed when he saw the live readings on my phone. He made the call immediately. Diane followed me into the control room. Put the gate back. They cut the lower alignment pin. I pointed through the window. One of the contractors held the severed steel piece in his hand. They had removed it because the gate was sticking under pressure. Without that pin, the gate could not slide safely back into the track. Diane stared at it as if the metal had betrayed her. Then shut off the river another way. I pulled my father's brass key from my pocket and crossed to the emergency bypass panel. That is what I have been preparing to do. The old lock resisted for half a second, then turned. Beyond the south wall, buried valves began to move for the first time in decades. A heavy vibration passed through the floor. Outside, water entered the emergency channel and curved away from the subdivision. The main houses would remain above the projected line. The county bridge would hold. The wastewater station would stay dry. But the western flats sat directly in the bypass path. Diane's orange stakes disappeared first. Then the fresh gravel road vanished beneath brown water. Her face drained of color as she understood where the river was going. My development site, she whispered. I looked at the signed warnings in the deputy's hand. No, Diane. The floodplain. The emergency channel roared across the western flats, spreading in a broad brown sheet exactly where the old flood map said it would. Diane stood in the control room doorway, staring as the orange survey stakes vanished one by one. The fresh gravel road dissolved into muddy ribbons. Decorative fencing tilted in the current. No homes were touched. No residents were trapped. The bypass carried the pressure away from Riverstone Heights and into land that had always belonged to the river. Sheriff Daniel Cross arrived with county emergency crews just as the lower bridge sensor stabilized. He stepped through the rain, studied the live readings on my phone, and then looked at the signed authorization in the deputy's hand. Diane moved toward him before he could speak. He flooded private property, she said. Her voice shook beneath the sharpness. He opened that channel on purpose. I pointed toward the evacuation map mounted inside the control room. The channel is part of the certified emergency system. I opened it to protect the subdivision after your contractor disabled the main gate. Daniel read the warning letter, the delivery receipt, and the additional work authorization Diane had signed that morning. Rainwater ran from the brim of his hat onto the pages. "You were informed this could happen?" he asked her. Diane looked toward Curtis Vale, but her consultant had already stepped away from the cameras. Before she could answer, a section of saturated soil collapsed along the development site, exposing a row of black drainage pipes beneath the mud. They ran from the proposed lots toward the reservoir without county markings or inspection tags. Farther down, the current peeled away a torp and revealed poured concrete footings, electrical conduit, and stacks of building material hidden behind a cedar screen. Owen arrived beside Nora and took one look at the exposed work. "None of that is on the approved plan," he said. The local reporter turned her camera toward Diane. Diane demanded that everyone leave her property. Nora answered before I could. "According to the county plat, this is Caleb Mercer's flood easement. According to your own filing, the construction company belongs to Whitlock Residential Partners." Diane's face went still. Then Martin Hale, the HOA treasurer, stepped out of a dark sedan near the access road. He carried a waterproof document case against his chest. Martin had spent 6 years approving budgets and saying almost nothing at meetings. That morning, he opened the case and handed Nora a flash drive, printed emails, and bank records. Diane had used HOA reserve money to pay for the survey work, the hidden drainage system, and the altered flood map. She had also promised the developer access to the shoreline before receiving permission from the county or consent from the landowner. One email contained the exact sentence she had denied for weeks: "Once the Mercer Gate is removed, the lake level will drop and the lots can be recorded before anyone understands the flood designation." Daniel read it twice. Behind him, the river carried Diane's polished future Riverstone waterfront common sign past the clubhouse lawn. By afternoon, the county had suspended the access order, sealed the construction site, and opened formal investigations into the altered records and unauthorized spending. The insurance representative arrived before sunset and photographed every signed warning. Diane kept insisting that the damage was my fault. Nora placed the receipt with Diane's blue signature on the hood of the sheriff's vehicle. "You did not remove his dam," she said. "You removed your own protection." For the first time since the cream-colored envelope appeared on my door, Diane had nothing left to say. By the time the river returned to its normal channel, the Western Flats looked less like a failed development and more like the land my father remembered. Mud covered the gravel road. The hidden footing stood exposed beneath a thin layer of silt. Diane's polished sign had been recovered nearly a mile downstream, wedged against a sycamore tree with the word waterfront facing the mud. 3 weeks later, the county held a public hearing in the Riverstone clubhouse. The room smelled of damp carpet, coffee, and fresh paint where maintenance workers had covered water stains near the back wall. Every chair was filled. Nora sat beside me with 2 binders of evidence. Owen carried the original flood map in a protective sleeve. Martin Hale took a seat in the front row, no longer silent. The county engineer spoke first. He confirmed that the dam was a certified flood control structure, that Riverstone Heights had been approved only because it remained operational, and that the altered map submitted by Whitlock Residential Partners did not match county records. The State Dam Safety Office followed. They ordered the gate restored, the emergency channel cleared, and permanent warning signs installed at every access point. Then the HOA's insurance representative stood and explained that the policy would not cover deliberate work performed after written safety warnings had been received. Diane sat at the end of the board table in a grey suit, without her usual smile. When her attorney asked whether I had intentionally redirected water toward the development site, I answered with the truth. I redirected it away from homes, the county bridge, and the wastewater station. The emergency channel followed the route approved in 1986. Owen unfolded the old map. The blue line crossed the Western Flats exactly where the water had gone. Gravity had followed the plan more faithfully than Diane had. The board voted to remove her before the hearing ended. The county cancelled the 6 proposed lots. The state referred the altered filings and unauthorized use of HOA reserves for further review. Whitlock Residential Partners lost its permits, and the HOA was ordered to pay for the full restoration of the gate, the damaged access road, and every inspection required afterward. The final cost was more than $2 million, not because the river destroyed homes, but because Diane had built an entire scheme on land she did not own and engineering she did not understand. Restoration took 4 months. On the first cold morning in November, a crane lowered the repaired steel gate into its track. The alignment pin slid into place with a clean metallic knock. I turned my father's brass key in the control panel and watched the pressure needle settle below the red line. The old clock still ran 2 minutes slow. I left it that way. At the next HOA meeting, the new treasurer handed me a check for $400, refunding the original fee. I pushed it back across the table. Use it for the new sign. A week later, the sign stood beside the control house in plain black letters. This structure protects the entire watershed. Alteration requires county and state authorization. I read it while water moved steadily through the spillway, quiet and controlled. Diane believed a small fee gave her power over my land. In the end, the river did not punish her. The records did. The signatures did. The truth did. Justice was never the flood. Justice was every warning she signed and chose to ignore.